की स्टार्ट कर दीजिए। हाँ। जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी, 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 जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी, जय गोपी जन वल्लभा, जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी, जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी, यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन, यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन, यमुना तीरावनचारी, यमुना तीरावनचारी, यमुना तीरावनचारी, यमुना तीरावनचारी, जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी, जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare
Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
हरिनाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।
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 नारायणं नमस्कृत्य
नारायणं नमस्कृत्य
नरं चैव नरोत्तमं
नरं चैव नरोत्तमं
देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं
देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं
ततो जयमुदीरये।
ततो जयमुदीरये।
नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु
अष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु
नित्यं भागवत सेवया
नित्यं भागवत सेवया
भगवत्युत्तमश्लोके
भगवति उत्तमश्लोके
भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी।
भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी।
We are reading from Canto 5, chapter 14, verse number 28. क्वापि देव मायाया स्त्रिया भुजा लतोपगूढ़ प्रस्कन्ना विवेक विज्ञानो यद विहार ग्रह आरंभाकुल हृदयस् तद आश्रयावसक्ता सूत दुहित्री कलत्र भाषितावलोका विचेष्टिता पहप हृदय आत्मानम अजितात्मा परे अंधे तमसी प्रहीनोति. Word to word meanings: Kwapi, somewhere, Deva Mayaya, by the influence of illusory energy, Striya, in the form of one's girlfriend or wife, Bhujalata, by beautiful arms, which are compared to tender creepers in the forest, Upaguda, being deeply embraced, Praskanna, lost, Viveka, all intelligence, Vijnana, scientific knowledge, Yat Viharaha, for the enjoyment of the wife, Graha Arambha, to find a house or apartment, Akula Hridaya, whose heart becomes engrossed, Tat, of that house, Ashraya Avasakta, who are under the shelter, Suta, of sons, Duhitra, of daughters, Kalatra, of the wife, Bhashita Avaloka, by the conversations and by the beautiful glances, Vicheshtita, by activities, Apahrita Hridaya, whose consciousness is taken away, Atmanam, himself, Ajita, uncontrolled, Atma, whose self, apare, in unlimited, andhe, blind darkness, tamasi, in hellish life, prahinoti, heals. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Sometimes the conditioned soul is attracted by illusion personified, his wife or girlfriend, and becomes eager to be embraced by a woman. Thus he loses his intelligence as well as the knowledge of life's goal. At that time, no longer attempting spiritual cultivation, he becomes overly attached to his wife or girlfriend and tries to provide her with a suitable apartment. Again, he becomes very busy under the shelter of that home and is captivated by the talks, glances, and activities of his wife and children. In this way, he loses his Krishna consciousness and throws himself in the dense darkness of material existence. Purport. When the conditioned soul is embraced by his beloved wife, he forgets everything about Krishna consciousness. The more he becomes attached to his wife, the more he becomes implicated in family life. One Bengali poet, Bankim Chandra, says that to the eyes of the lover, the beloved is always very beautiful, even though ugly. This attraction is called Devamaya. The attraction between man and woman is the cause of bondage for both. Actually, both belong to the Para Prakriti, the superior energy of the Lord. But both are actually Prakriti, female. However, both want to enjoy one another. They are sometimes described as Purusha, male. Actually, neither is Purusha, but both can be superficially described as Purusha. As soon as a man and woman are united, they become attached to home, hearth, land, friendship, and money. In this way, they are both entrapped in material existence. The word Bhuja Lata Upaguda, meaning being embraced by beautiful arms which are compared to creepers, describes the way the conditioned soul is bound within this material world. The products of sex life, sons and daughters certainly follow. This is the way of material existence. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamsha Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyat Deshitarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaura Tushe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpataro Bhisha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripatam ham vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Parmananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. So we are discussing this verse from the 5th canto, 14th chapter. So I'll just give a little background. So this is a discussion that is going on between Shukdev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. So in the previous chapter, there were instructions given by Jad Bharat. There were instructions given by Jad Bharat to Maharaj Rahugana. Jad Bharat was a very, very great personality, elevated personality, who was completely engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, completely thinking about the Lord. And he was the one who gave certain instructions to a Maharaj. His name was Rahugana. So now, in the previous chapter, those instructions were given there, but they were given in an allegorical way. They were explained in different analogies, and different things were given. And at the end, Parikshit Maharaj told that I cannot understand, I did not understand these analogies, or I cannot understand the purport of these instructions that are there. So in this chapter, the different instructions that are there, they are basically explaining the allegories that were given in the previous chapter. Previous chapter, different allegories that were given, they have been explained here that what is the meaning of those. So this shloka that is there, this is the 20th shloka that explains the previous chapter, verse number 16. So in the previous chapter, if we see verse number 16, it was said, Prasajjati kwapi lata bhuja shrayas tad ashraya vakta pada duja spreha. So here it was mentioned that sometimes a conditioned soul, he takes shelter, and that was given as Lata Bhuja Ashraya. Lata is creeper, Bhuja is arms. So it was mentioned in the previous chapter that the conditioned soul, he becomes more and more attached because he takes shelter of these creepers. Or the explanation that is given here is, creepers are the soft arms of his beautiful wife. So when a person takes shelter by such creepers, and is attached to the sweet singing of his sweet voice of his wife, that's how a person becomes more and more entangled in this material world. This was what was explained in the previous chapter, that how a person takes shelter of these false creepers, takes shelter of the soft arms of his wife, and he becomes completely mesmerized, entangled. And he wants to hear the sweet voice of her wife, of his wife. Even it was explained that even the wife chastises, the person feels very nice. Person becomes very, very happy. Because he just wants to hear, he's completely illusioned in that. And same thing is mentioned here. The conditioned soul sometimes is attracted by illusion personified and becomes eager to be embraced by a woman. So this is basically described as the position of a conditioned soul in this material ocean, in this Bhavasagar, in this ocean of birth and death, that he is completely illusioned. He does not know his constitutional position. He forgets his constitutional position as being servant of the Supreme Lord, and here he wants to enjoy. And that is what is given, that he becomes very, very eager to be embraced by a woman. Now someone may ask that why so much eagerness is there? Or why a person is so eager to be embraced by a woman? So as Prabhupada explains many times, for the materialists who have no knowledge of spiritual life, who don't understand the purpose of life, goal of life, so for them these are the goal of life. The goal of life is to make money and then enjoy with women, wine, all these things. That is the complete goal of life. As Bhagavatam also states that shloka, Nidraya hrete naktam vyavayana chavavaya diva charte haya rajan kutumba bharane nava. Meaning these people, the gross materialists who have no knowledge of the spiritual life, completely throughout the day they are busily engaged in working very, very hard. They work very, very hard just to maintain their family members, just to maintain their family. And in the night they have just two pleasures. What are these? Either sex life or sleep. And this is how a materialist completely spends his life working very, very hard. And that, as we know that in Power Guides explained that the foam comes out of his mouth in the night. And the person is completely busy, entangled in his life. And it was not that someone may say, okay, it's a new concept and now people have become atheists. Even in the past, there were such philosophers. As Prabhupada gives the example of Charvak Muni. Even his philosophy was same. And I was surprised to hear people have done PhDs on that philosophy also. And what was his philosophy? Simple: eat, drink and be merry. There is no God, there is no need to worship God. And just beg, borrow and steal, eat ghee. Somehow or the other, just eat ghee and enjoy life. And now it has changed to beg, borrow and steal, eat meat. Eat meat and enjoy life. So this is what we see. This has been existing even before this philosophy was there. And even he also disapproved. He also said that there is no God. just enjoy life. And even his philosophy is similar to what we discuss, Pratyaksh Praman. Even he used to say, whatever we see, we can believe. Like we say, there are 5 material elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. This person used to say there are only 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and air. Ether he did not accept because we cannot see ether. So his philosophy was very, very simple. That's the philosophy of people nowadays, the atheist. They might not be knowing what's their philosophy, but this is coming from Charvak Muni only. That what we cannot see, we cannot accept. So we cannot see ether, we cannot accept ether. And about the worship of God, if someone asked him that why so many people are worshipping God, what do you want to say about that? So he says that is just a cunning system introduced by the so-called priests and people and sadhus that are there, just to convince the public, just to make money or something like that. But do not believe in the existence of God. So this is what is described about the gross materialists that are there, completely engaged in sense gratification, do not know the goal of life, and just busy enjoying their material life, just busy trying to enjoy in this world, but they meet up with so many miseries. So here Prabhupada writes, at that time in this purpose lies, he loses his intelligence as well as the knowledge of life's goal. Basically, the person does not understand what's the life goal, or hardly interested in following, even if he knows pursuing the life's goal. And he no longer attempts for spiritual cultivation, because he becomes overly attached to his wife or girlfriend. Of course, girlfriend, Prabhupada introduced this word, seeing the situation of the Western world, and trying to provide her with a suitable apartment. So this is what he sees. The person forgets his position. And even the purport, Prabhupada explains that both the male and female. So we know from the Bhagavad Gita that Bhumir Apano Apo Analo Vayu Kham Mano Buddhir Evacha. These are all the separated energies of the Lord. And these are the material or inferior energies of the Lord. And then in the next shloka he says, Aparayam itastoyanam jiva bhuta mahabaho yayedam dharate jagat. So basically the jivas, the living entities, are also energies of the Lord, but they are superior energies of the Lord. But one thing that is made very, very clear, that they are also Prakriti. They are not Purusha. They are Para-Prakriti, or they are superior energies, but they are also Prakritis. But problem happens, as it's described in this verse, that both belong to the Para-Prakriti, but when they forget their position. And it's not just about the male. Both of them, male and female, when they forget that they are Prakriti and they try to be Purushas, they try to enjoy in this world, that is the cause of their entanglement. And that is what is given here, that both of them want to enjoy one another. And that's why they are sometimes described as Purusha. Ultimately, we understand no one is Purusha. Both, be it the male or be it the female, they are both Prakriti. They are inferior. They are not Purusha. They are not the enjoyers. Enjoyer is only one, that is the Supreme Lord. But when we forget this position, when they forget this identity and they also want to be enjoyer, that is the reason for them being in the material world, because they were envious of the Lord. That is why they start suffering, or they get entangled. In the Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna tells to Arjuna. Krishna talks, when Arjuna asked about, tell me about Prakriti, Purusha, tell me about all these living entities, tell me about what is knowledge, what is ignorance. So there in the 13th chapter, Krishna speaks this shloka, Purusha Prakriti stohi, bhungte Prakriti jan gunan, karanam guna sangasya sadasad yoni janmasu. And there he is calling Purusha, he is referring to the living entity. Krishna is telling that these living entities who consider themselves as Purusha, who thinks that they are the enjoyers, they are the Purusha, and they are in this material nature. They are in this material nature thinking themselves to be enjoyer, but they are ultimately being driven by the 3 modes of nature. Jan Gunan, the 3 modes of nature, all the activities this Purusha is doing, or these living entities are doing, they are under the influence of this mode of passion, ignorance and goodness. And that is the reason they keep on associating with material nature in that way and taking more and more births in different species of life. Sometimes they take birth in higher species of life, sometimes in the humanly life, sometimes in the lower forms of life, just because of this mentality that is mentioned even here, the mentality of becoming the Purusha. But ultimately we don't understand that there is only one Supreme Purusha. That is the Supreme Lord, and all of us, be it a male body or a female body, it's ultimately meant to serve the Supreme Lord, or ultimately meant to serve the Supreme Purusha that is there. And that is the reason a person being in the modes of nature takes on birth one after another, keeps on taking birth one after another, and becomes entangled in this world. So this is the position we discussed about the gross materialists that are there. Materialists who have no knowledge of spiritual life, who are completely ignorant, or either if they have knowledge, they are not interested to practice spiritual life. But this purport is even valid for the spiritualist or people who are practicing spirituality. And we have numerous examples in Bhagavatam of how people who are practicing spirituality or who are on the path of spiritual progress, even they get illusioned or they get sidetracked by this problem or by this illusion that is there. That is what Prabhupada refers in the translation, that he says illusion personified. That when the conditioned soul is attracted by illusion personified. So that is what we see, that not just materialists, even spiritualists get sidetracked by this illusion personified. And we have many such examples. We have the example of Ajamil, who was a nicely practicing Brahmana, nicely practicing all the rules and regulations. Everything he was doing, nicely engaged in spiritual activity. And that time also when he got distracted, he had gone out for a service. His father has sent him to get the logs of wood to be engaged in the sacrifice. But just when he was coming back, just by the sight of it. So Prabhupada in this purport writes that when the conditioned soul is embraced by his beloved wife, he forgets everything about Krishna consciousness. But here we see many examples where forget about being embraced, even by the sight of it, a person forgets everything. We have the example of Ajamil. Just by seeing those prostitute and that person in an inappropriate position, in an inappropriate way, he got bewildered and he forgot everything he had practiced. Or forgot all about his spiritual life. He took the prostitute, took her to his home, and then he sent out his chaste wife who was there. Because he was completely illusioned by this illusion personified. Just by the sight of it, not even being embraced. The person became completely engaged or completely had a fall down from the path of spiritual life. And we have other examples. Ajamil is one of them. We have the example of Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra was once, what happened, he was a Kshatriya, he was a ruler. And once he was humiliated by Vashishta Muni. Once he had asked a cow from Vashishta Muni refused to give that cow. And when Vishwamitra tried to employ force, engage force, he was still unsuccessful in getting the cow. So there also it comes, he starts practicing austerities. He also practices austerities just to increase or just to get more bala or more strength, so that he can also become as strong as Vashishta Muni. And there when he was practicing austerities, someone in the heavenly planets became very, very afraid. And who is that? Indra. So he became very fearful that if this person becomes very strong, very powerful, then he may occupy my position. And then he sends Menaka there. Then he sends Menaka, and it's described just by hearing the sound of the ankle bells. So Prabhupada is writing that conditioned soul is embraced by his wife. But here we see the examples like that Ajamil just by seeing that sight. Here Vishwamitra Muni just by hearing the sound of the ankle bells, he got distracted. He opened his half-closed eyes and he also started looking. And then he also got deviated from spiritual life and started to enjoy life with that woman, with that heavenly damsel. And this is how a person gets deviated from spiritual life, just by this illusion personified. And we can see the extent of how strong this is. Like these people, we can say, okay, Ajamil was there, he was traveling in the forest. Vishwamitra Muni was also on the land. Now we have one more example of a person who was inside the water. He was also very deeply engaged in austerities, very deeply engaged in penances in the water of Yamuna. But he also got deviated. Now just imagine inside the water, no human being, no male and female can come and distract a person. And very, very powerful Rishi, very, very powerful yogi he was. But what happened? One day he saw the sight of a fish, a pair of fish engaged in sexual affairs. And just by seeing that fish, just by seeing those fish engaged in sexual affairs, he also got sidetracked from the path. He got that desire to have that pleasure of sex life. And that's why this Rishi, his name was Saubari Muni. He also came out of the water and he went to the king of Mathura. So he was in Yamuna. He was practicing austerities in Yamuna. And he went to the king of Mathura. His name was King Mandata. And he went there and he asked for his daughters in marriage. Now in this pastime, we can learn many, many important instructions that were given. In fact, we'll see in this pastime, Saubari Muni himself gives many amazing instructions. So he goes to this King Mandata, he asks for his daughters in marriage. And of course, this person, since he was a yogi, he was practicing austerities, he was not very good looking. The Sobri Muni, he had turned old, his body had turned very weak, and his skin was very slack, his hair had turned grey. So he was not very good looking. And King Mandata, he said that my daughters have the right to choose their own husband. Or he said that whatever they decide, I'll accept. And Sobri Muni understood that hardly he is not good looking, his looks, his hair has turned grey, all his body, no woman will be attracted to him. So he understood this very, very difficult to marry someone in this way. But then he was not an ordinary Rishi or a simple yogi who was there. He was a very, very powerful Rishi. So it is described he turned his body. He turned his body into a very, very beautiful and handsome body. And then he went to the king, and then he was taken to the palaces, to the place where the princes were staying. And it's described all the 50 daughters were there. So earlier he had went to King Mandata just for begging the hand of, just for getting one daughter in marriage. But then he had turned himself into such a beautiful person. When he went inside, it's described all the 50 daughters, they started quarreling among each other. That I want to marry this person, I want to marry this person. And later it was decided all the 50 daughters married Sobri Muni. And then he was such a strong Rishi, such a powerful Rishi, that he created, even though he had nothing, he had no possessions, no wealth, just by his power, just by his strength, he created a very, very opulent home, opulent facilities, opulent garments, many, many maid servants, man servants inside the house, just for taking care of all the queens, or all his princesses, all his wives that were there. Beautiful lake, beautiful parks, everything he created there, just by his yogic power, just by his yogic strength. And it was described, it was so beautiful, all the strength or all the things he created was so opulent, so beautiful, that even this king who was there earlier, the king who he had approached, King Mandata, he also felt very, very insignificant in front of Sobri Muni's opulence. Even though he was a ruler of the entire world, even though he was such a great emperor, just by seeing opulence of Sobri Muni, he also felt insignificant. He also lost his false prestige, whatever prestige or pride he had, he lost this just by seeing the arrangement made by Sobri Muni. But now there is a very, very important lesson in this. So this person, he had all the facilities, he got deviated on the path, he got deviated on his path of spiritual life, he saw that pair of fishes and he became engaged in this sexual affairs. And he was a yogi, so he could do all these facilities just to enjoy whatever he wanted. But there this lesson comes, it's described that Sobri Muni, even after doing that, he was not satisfied. And there Prabhupada writes that a person who is a Atma Tattvavi, or a person who has knowledge of spiritual life, he can never be satisfied by any kind of material engagement that is there. Whatever he tries in his life, whatever things he does in his life, whatever kind of material satisfaction or material desires he tries to fulfill, he can never be satisfied. His Sobri Muni, literally we see he had all the kinds of opulences a person can expect in the material world. His amazing palace, he had literally created a palace with beautiful lakes, beautiful gardens, fragrant flowers, and the wives, he had arranged for beautiful servants to take care of the wives. But still, even after enjoying a lot with them, he was not at all satisfied. Rather, he felt completely insatisfied or completely unsatisfied by all that. And there Prabhupada explains that a person who has spirituality or who is practicing spirituality can never be satisfied by all these material allurements that are there. Even though he got deviated, but it's described, or the example that is given is just like that is there is fire. Now in fire, we cannot stop the blazing fire just by adding ghee in it. The more we add ghee, the more fire will increase. Similarly, material desires can never be satisfied just by fulfilling them. A person can run after fulfilling one desire after another, but he can never be satisfied this way. And this is the classic case we see in this example of Sobri Muni. He satisfied all his desires. He was expecting one wife, he got 50, but still he was not at all satisfied. And that's why we can understand that no one can be happy in this world just by all these engagements, just by engaging with the opposite gender or all these different kind of things, because the ultimate enjoyer is the Supreme Lord. As we say in the Gita, Bhuktaram Yagya Tapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, that he is the Bhukta, he is the ultimate enjoyer of this world. And of course, in this pastime, there are multiple other instructions that is there. One of the things that is given is because Sobri Muni had committed an offense, and that is why he got the desire. He had committed an offense against Garuda. So in the pastime it comes that once Garuda had come to catch a fish in that river Yamuna. And Saubri Muni had given shelter to the fish. Saubri Muni didn't allow Garuda to come and catch the fish. And because Saubri Muni had offended Garuda, that is the reason he got that desire to enjoy by seeing that fish. He got that desire to enjoy material life. But Saubri Muni himself, when he realizes that he is not satisfied in this, he gives a very, very amazing instruction. He speaks a very, very amazing shloka, which is an instruction for all the spiritualists he gives, that what should they do and what should they avoid. And he says, Sangam Tajeta Mithuna Vratinam Mumukshu Sarvatmana na Vishsajed Bahir Indriyani Ekas Charan Rahisi Chittam Ananta Ishe Yunjita Tad Vratishu Sadhushu Chet Prasanga. What he says, what is meant by this? He says, Sangam Tajeta, or one has to give up that Sangha, or that kind of association. What kind of association? Mithuna Vratinam Mumukshuhu. Mithuna Vratinam means persons who are interested or engaged, too much engrossed in sex life. A person should give up completely such association. And Prabhupada explains there that Mithuna Vratinam is a person who is engaged in sex life, either legal or illegal. So he says any kind of person, legally he is engaged or illegally he is engaged. But such association should be completely given up. Given up by whom? Who is mumukshu, or who is desiring liberation from this material bondage, who wants to get out of this material world. He has to give up this association. This is what Saubri Muni is telling. After realizing that he was not satisfied, he says that a person should give up this engagement. And then he says, Sarvatmana na visrajet bahir indriyani. Indriyani, or the senses that are there, that should also be completely, or that should not be employed in these external things that are there. Basically in seeing, hearing, talking about sex life. A person should completely refrain from all these engagements of the different senses that are there. It's very, very important to give up that association and give up engaging our senses in such activities. And then he says, Ekas charan rahasi chittam ananta ishe yunjita tad vratishu sadhushu chet prasanga. Then he says that one should always stay in a secluded place and he should completely fix his mind at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or Ananta Ishe. He should completely be in secluded and fix his mind on that Supreme Personality of Godhead, giving up all such kind of false associations, giving up all these false engagement of the senses that are there. And at last he says that if the person actually desires some association, then he should take association of those sadhushu chet prasanga. He should take association of those who are similarly engaged in devotional service. So he should give up the false association or association of non-devotees that are there. And he should also give up engagement of his senses in all such activities. And finally, he should take the association of devotees. He should be in the association of people who are similarly engaged. And that's what in the Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu also comes, that we have to take association of Sajatya and Sigdhasya people. Sajatya means people who are engaged in thinking in the same way, or people who are engaged in practicing devotional service. That the person should always take association of such who have the same goal in mind. And Saubri Muni is here telling the same thing from his own practical association. That one should either give up those false association and take association of someone interested in the same goal. And there is one more very amazing shloka which Prabhupada often used to quote in this regard. Shloka given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, where he also speaks about the dangers of this materialistic association, of danger of association of opposite gender. So this is a shloka Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to say, Nishkinchanasya bhagavad bhajanon mukasya param param jigamashor bhavasagarasya sandarshanam vishainam atha yoshitam cha ha hanta hanta visha bhakshnato api asadu. So what he says here is Nishkinchana, that a person who is a Nishkinchana. Nishkinchana means person who has given up completely the desires for material enjoyment, or who doesn't want to engage in any material kind of desire, and who just want to engage in Bhagavad Bhajan Mukasya, or want to engage in serving the Supreme Lord. So for such a person who is desiring this, to be engaged in the service of the Lord and to cross over this material ocean, a person who wants to actually cross over this material ocean of birth and death, for such a person, two things are very, very dangerous. What are those two things? Sandarshanam Vishainam Atha Yoshitamcha. Two things, seeing two things is very, very dangerous, or associating with two things is very, very dangerous. What are those? First is seeing a materialist engaged in sense gratification. For a spiritualist, seeing a materialist who is completely engaged in sense gratification or associating with such a person, that is very, very dangerous. And second is atha yoshitamcha. Second is seeing a woman who is similarly interested. Basically, for a person who wants to cross over the cycle of birth and death, who wants to engage in the service of the Supreme Lord, engaging with a materialist or associating with a materialist engaged in sense gratification, or a woman who is engaged in such activities, sense gratification, that is very, very dangerous. And Mahaprabhu compares that, he says that is even more dangerous than drinking poison willingly. That even if a person drinks poison, that is not that much dangerous, as much dangerous as is this association. That's how he warns us about the association of materialist or Vishayi Sangi, person who are engaged in association of women. And we also see in the personal example in the pastimes of Mahaprabhu, the example of Chota Haridas, who didn't even grossly engage with any woman. He was just engaged in looking lustfully at a woman. And Mahaprabhu was so angry at him that he removed him from his service, just because of his small mistake of looking lustfully at a woman. It's described that he removed him from his service, and later, out of repentance, when Chota Haridas committed suicide, when this also came to Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu said that everyone has to suffer the actions of his own fruitive activities. That time also Mahaprabhu did not say anything in favor of him. That time also Mahaprabhu condemned that thing, what he did. So that's how we see how strict Mahaprabhu was in this regard of association. Of course, we don't, Prabhupada didn't expected any one of us to do such a similar thing. We know one of the pastimes where one sannyasi committed suicide, and later Prabhupada told that Mahaprabhu could say such things because he was the Supreme Lord himself. He can change everyone, he can preach to everyone just by his own supreme power. But I need the help, or I need the association or help of assistance of everyone who is there. So Prabhupada was very merciful, definitely didn't say that one should go and commit suicide. He always was very merciful, accommodating everyone. Even though a person had a fall down, Prabhupada tried to accommodate that person. But the point was, ultimately Prabhupada also expected that ultimately everyone should come to this ideal standard that is there. And that is what is given, that unless one gives up all the sense gratification or all tendencies of engaging in sense gratification, it is very, very difficult to attain the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And if it's difficult to attain the lotus feet of Mahaprabhu, then next to impossible to attain the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. And that's why this vairagya is very, very important, or detaching ourselves from such sense gratification. This is what one of the verses which Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya composed in glorification of Mahaprabhu. Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yogam Shikshartham Eka Purusha Purana Shri Krishna Chaitanya Sharira Dhari Kripam Buddhi Yastam Aham Prapadya. He says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to teach us three things. And what were those? Vairagya, Vidya and Nija Bhakti Yoga. Vidya is knowledge, real knowledge of who are we, what is our constitutional position, and what are we supposed to be engaged in. Vidya, Nija Bhakti Yoga, knowledge of his devotional service. And the third thing is Vairagya. And what is the Vairagya we are talking of? Detachment from everything which is not favorable to Krishna consciousness. Of course, this is not like the Vairagya of the Jnanis, that being detached from anything and everything, becoming just like a stone or stone-hearted person, but detachment from everything which is not favorable to Krishna consciousness. And one of the things that is mentioned, as we have already discussed, the association of women, and more dangerous than that is the association of those who are too fond of women, or those who are too fond of speaking about women or talking about women. That's what in the shloka comes, tamo dwaram yoshitam sangi sangam. That one who is attracted, too fond of women, or has too much desire about engaging in sense gratification, such association is even more dangerous than the association of women. And that leads to the hellish condition. That leads to hellish life, because a person falls down from the spiritual path. Because that is but natural, that person has such a strong desire, and if we associate with such a person, we will also get that kind of desire. And so a person will get deviated from spiritual life. And that's why Mahaprabhu said, Asatsanga Tyag Ei Vaishnavachar, that a person has to give up this Asatsanga, give up this Sangha or association of persons who are engaged in sense gratification, or persons who are too much fond of women. That is very, very important. That's why it's natural that when we speak about these things in this age, that means one has to give up association of any kind of non-devotee who is there. Because anyone who is not a devotee, anyone who is not practicing devotional service, it's but natural that in this material world he will be engaged in all these things, either in sense gratification or in engaging or in too much fond about women or too much fond about speaking about women. And that's why Mahaprabhu's teaching, he says that give up the association of all non-devotees, give up the association of anyone who is not practicing Krishna consciousness. And the dangers are mentioned in many different purports, many different places in the Bhagavatam about these kind of association. Even Kapil Dev in his shlokas, in his teachings, he speaks about this. Lord Kapil Dev, he also speaks that any kind of infatuation or any kind of bondage in this world, which a person can have or which a man can have, being attracted to any kind of object. Any object a person gets attracted to in this world and he also gets entangled. That is not very dangerous, or that is not that much dangerous as much as the attachment resulting from a woman. A person who gets attached to a woman or a man who is fond of women, that kind of attachment is very, very dangerous, or that deteriorates a person from spiritual life. And any other attachment in this world is not that dangerous. This is what Lord Kapil Dev gives in his teachings. And that's why Prabhupada used to say this, that the most contaminating thing in this world, or the most dangerous thing that spoils us from this spiritual life or the path of spiritual life, is this attraction to sexual life or attraction to illusion personified, that is attraction to opposite gender. And this is the topmost cause that is given. Prabhupada writes that this is the topmost cause of us being in this material world. This infatuation or bond, this attraction to opposite gender. That is the most dangerous kind of attraction or most dangerous kind of association in this material world. And that's why, as we were discussing, reading yesterday also, that training is very, very important. As we were reading in that question that was there in the Bhakti Vaibhav, that how should girls and boys be trained? So both should be engaged or trained in spiritual duties properly, so at the time of cooperation both can be benefited. So what was the training? The girls should be trained in chastity and being faithful, and boys should be trained in brahmacharya. In the previous times, all these trainings were there. The girls were properly trained and the boys were also properly trained, so that at the time when they come together, they do not get entangled. Because unless and until that training is not there, it's but natural to get deviated from the path of devotional service. And that's why when we speak so much about the varnashrama system also that is there, the 4 ashramas, the brahmacharya ashram, grahastha, vanaprastha and sannyas. Even in that, we see how in the past, in the Vedic culture, when these ashrams used to be followed, when the training was given, how there was so much restriction on the free mixing of man and woman. In the brahmacharya ashram is described in the Guru class, there was till far away, till a huge distance, there was no smell. It was described that there was not even a smell of woman that was there. Forget about the physical association of woman. Only the Guru's wife used to be there who used to take care of the children. But apart from that, there was no association of women. So much restriction was there in the brahmacharya ashram. And of course, in the vanaprastha and grahastha, in the sannyas ashram also, there is no question of at all associating with women. And even in the grahastha ashram, it was described that the association was very, very limited. Or it was not like the association of today, that unlimited association, enjoy as much as you want. That association in the grahastha ashram was also limited and restricted under certain rules and regulations. Because ultimately the goal of varnashrama or goal of this entire varnashrama system was to please the Supreme Lord, to engage in the service of the Lord. And for that, naturally, if a person has to please the Supreme Lord, engage full time in the service of the Lord, he has to get detached from everything material. And that was a training that was there in the varnashrama. Even in the grahastha ashram, the training was there to not be entangled, or even the association was very, very restricted. And finally, a person has to get detached when he comes in a vanaprastha ashram. He has to leave that household also. That is why in the past, all these trainings, or so much stress was given on this restricting the association of man and woman, because that is a big obstruction in spiritual life, a big obstruction in the path of spiritual life. And we see many examples of spiritualists, many examples of great spiritualists in the pages of Bhagavatam, and even in life examples we have seen in our own movement, that how many great devotees, many great stalwarts have deviated from the path of spiritual life just because of this eagerness to engage in illusory activities, or engage in being embraced by a woman. So this till now we discussed about the gross materialists who were there, who were completely ignorant and completely engaged in all these activities. We also discussed about spiritual practitioners, and we also discussed that how they have to be very, very careful. Very, very careful when they are executing spiritual life, when they are practicing Vedi sadhana bhakti, not to get deviated by all these things. And finally, there is a class of personalities, or there are some who are not affected by these things. There are some, although here it says that Prabhupada says when a conditioned soul is embraced by his wife, he forgets everything about Krishna consciousness. But there is one personality, or there are multiple personalities who are not affected by this. One of them, of course, is the Supreme Lord himself. Here it is given, a person forgets about Krishna in Krishna consciousness, but Krishna himself is not affected by all these things. Sometimes people bring Lord also on their platform, that Lord can enjoy with so many gopis, he can do Ras dance, and he can do this Leela, that Leela. We also can enjoy just like him. But we have to understand that the Lord is not affected by all these things. Lord himself in the Gita says, Devi hi esha gunamayi mama maya duratya mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. That this maya of mine, this illusory energy of mine is very, very strong to overtake, or very, very strong to surpass. But those who take my shelter, mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite, they can very easily cross through this maya, cross through this illusory energy which is there. And now it is but obvious, if the surrendered souls can cross over this illusory energy, then there is no question of the Lord getting entangled in this. Or Lord never gets entangled in such things, or Lord never gets entangled by this illusory energy, because it's his own creation. And we have such pastimes in the Krishna book also. Just like when the Supreme Lord, it's described when he was in Dwarka, when he was married to the 16,000 queens, and he used to expand himself. So in all the different palaces, he used to be present with all the queens. And there also it's described when at night they used to sleep, these queens used to embrace the Supreme Lord. The queens, even Rukmini, used to embrace the Supreme Lord, and they used to sleep like that. But there also the pastime comes when in the morning, when the Brahma Muhurta time used to come, when that morning time of morning duties used to come, Krishna used to immediately get up from the bed, get out from that embrace, and go with his morning activities, go with his activities of taking bath and engaging in all those activities. Of course, he is the Lord, he has no need to take bath, but still he used to engage in all these activities, just to set an example that how a person should be very, very strict in his spiritual life. And in the Lord's own example, he says that even Rukmini used to sleep like that, embracing the Lord. And she used to be disgusted when the Lord in the morning used to get up. But Lord is completely renounced of all these things. Lord is not attached to all these things. He does not get entangled in all these things. When the morning time for the Brahma Muhurta, when that time used to come, he used to get up and engage in his activities. So we see, even though conditioned souls are entrapped by all these things, conditioned souls are entrapped by the embrace of a wife, but the Supreme Lord himself, it's his own illusion that he has created. He is not entangled by all these things. Or no one can question, oh, Lord also sleeps like this in the palace of Dwarka, or Lord also does all those pastimes. He can do, he is the actual enjoyer always there. He is the Supreme Purusha who is there. He won't get entangled. And similarly, lastly, when Lord, as he mentioned, that Lord himself is not entangled, and also those devotees who are completely engaged in his devotional service, who have taken his complete shelter, they are also not affected. Or they are also not affected by this illusory energy of the Lord. And that also we have so many examples in the scriptures. We have the example of Chitraketu Maharaj. How when he attained perfection, we had vision of the Lord. After that, it is described he was engaged with the Vidyadhara woman, or the woman of the Vidyadhara planet. He was engaged, roaming around with them, glorifying the Supreme Lord. But he was completely busy in glorifying the Supreme Lord. He was not engaged in all these illusory pleasures that are there. He was not deviated from his spiritual life. And many such examples. We have the example of Bharat Maharaj, Amrish Maharaj, how they had such an opulent kingdom, how they had a beautiful wife, and everything was there. But they left everything just to engage in complete devotional service, just to take shelter of the Lord. So it's very, very clear that those personalities who take complete shelter of the Supreme Lord, they are not affected by all these things. And one amazing such example here we have is the example of one of our Goswamis, that is Raghunath Das Goswami. How in his pastime also it used to come that he used to run away from his home. Every day he used to run away from his home. In the middle of the night, his father would get up, catch him and bring him back. Again, next day he'll run and father will go and catch him and bring him back. So one day the mother told, or Raghunath Das Goswami's mother told his father that it seems our son has gone crazy, has gone mad. Let's tie him with ropes. We should tie him with ropes and keep him like that. Otherwise he'll run away, like keep on continuing like that. And there his father was not satisfied. Father was not very happy. And he said that when my son who has opulence like Indra, so they are very, very rich personalities. They were zamindars. They had so much opulence that was there. And his father says that when my son who has opulence like Indra and who has a beautiful wife just like an angel, when these things which are the most important things which binds a person to this material world, when these things couldn't tie his mind or couldn't bind Raghunath to this material world, what will these mere ropes do? Or how can these mere ropes tie him to this material world? They cannot tie. And his father also knew. His father also himself says that he has got the mercy of Lord Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And one who has received this mercy, one who has become madman in the love of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he cannot be stopped by any shackles. So even though externally his father was engaged in bringing him back, internally he also knew that this person has gone out of his hand. Or this person has got the mercy of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that's why we cannot stop him at home. And even later we see this was even glorified by Nityanand Prabhu. So when Raghunath Das Goswami goes in Panihati, he paid his obeisances to Nityanand Prabhu. Even Nityanand Prabhu says the same thing. That though this Raghunath, he has opulences like Indra, he has all the facilities, everything is there. He's completely detached from everything. He's completely detached from all the facilities. Rather, it's described he used to sleep outside his house. Even though he had opulent house that was there, a beautiful wife that was there inside the house, yet he was so detached from all that, he used to sleep outside the house just because he wanted to engage in the service of the Supreme Lord. He was disgusted with all the material opulences that are there. And that is what Nityanand Prabhu says, that a person who has got the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he cannot get attracted by all these opulences that are there, or he cannot be affected by all these opulences that are there, because he has been bestowed by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. And there he says a very amazing shloka. Nityanand Prabhu says that Krishna pada padma kanda yei jana paya brahma loka adi sukha tanre nahi bhaya. He says that one who has even a little bit experience of what? Krishna pada padma gandha, that one who experiences even little bit the fragrance of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, or one who gets little bit taste of the fragrance of the lotus feet of the Lord, then any kind of happiness, even happiness of the Brahma Loka or Adi Sukha, happiness of even Brahma Loka or opulence of even Brahma Loka, that also cannot allure a person, or that also cannot attract a person. One who has got even little taste of the lotus feet, fragrance of the lotus feet of the Lord. And that is what we see in this example of Raghunath Das Goswami and all these great spiritualists who were there, that they were not entangled by this. And we have countless such examples. We have the example of Haridas Thakur, Indradyumna Maharaj, and many such examples, where even though all these allurements were there, but still they were not deviated from the path, or they were completely engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord, in spite of all these allurements that are there. So now, what we can take away from this is that, as Prabhupada often used to say in his lectures, that the topmost cause of bondage in this world is this attraction between man and woman. That is the cause of bondage, and that leads to further expansions in the form of house, family, friends, relatives, and so many other expansions. And that's why for a spiritualist, for a practicing spiritualist, if he wants to get out of this bondage, it's very, very important to always associate with spiritualists, always associate with like-minded devotees, and avoid the association of such materialists, or giving up the satsanga that is there. One have to give us the sangha of materialists and also people who are engaged in sense gratification. Only by doing that, only by giving up that association, one can actually steadily practice devotional service. And another thing we learn from the example of Sauvri Muni, that one has to be very, very careful to avoid offenses also. Because if one commits offenses at the lotus feet of the Vaishnava, even though he distances himself from such association, even then Saubri Muni was inside the water. There was no chance of getting any kind of such association. But still, because of the offense committed at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, he got that desire, and he also engaged in those material activities or material sex pleasure. And that is why one has to be very, very careful not to commit any offenses. Because if one commits offenses, then naturally he'll get a desire to associate with such personalities or associate with materialists or to associate with women. So these are the few points, or these are the few things we can take away for us to always being in the association of spiritualists and to completely avoid such materialistic association and also avoid offenses in the association of devotees. And this is the only way we can save ourselves. As Prabhupada writes in this purport also, that a person who is engaged in all these activities, he loses his Krishna consciousness. And only way to save our Krishna consciousness, or only way to save ourselves from being deviated from this path, is to strictly avoid such asatsanga that is there. And otherwise, as Prabhupada says here, that a person loses his Krishna consciousness and throws himself in the dense darkness of material existence. If a person is not careful, if a person engages in association with such persons, association with such personalities, then only time is separating. Finally, he will be deviated from the path of spiritual life and finally throw himself in the dense darkness of material existence. And then it will continue. Then first he'll get a desire to associate with a woman. Then the product of sex life, as Prabhupada writes, the sons and the daughters, and then son's wife, and then their daughters, and then their daughters, and it will keep on continuing. And the materialistic association or such attachment will keep on expanding more and more, and a person will be completely entangled. And that is what Prabhupada described. That is the way of material existence. So a spiritualist or practicing spiritualist has to be very, very careful in this matter. So with this, I would like to pause here. I think it's already time. So we'll end. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय.